How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another edition of All In, where I'll pick a rock artist and I'll listen to the entire discography and I'll give my thoughts on it. And the rules go kind of like this. The band in question must have 5 or more original studio albums. Cover albums can count. I generally don't talk about live or acoustic albums unless the songs from them are in the original form. So, here we go. And I said at the end of the last video I was going to do something controversial, but that was going to be an episode with both me and GMC in it. And of course, you know, the winter sucking ass and everything. We really couldn't go through with the scheduled plan here. So, what we're going to do this week is we're going to move on to a fucking legend. That's right. Probably an artist that arguably started heavy metal as a whole. I mean, that could be debated, but I mean, I honestly think that this was the start of heavy metal, so yeah, we can't go an episode here, or we can't go this whole series without talking about Ozzy Osbourne. That's right. So, I was debating on how I wanted to do this one. Like, do I want to do just the solo stuff? Do I want to do both the Sabbath stuff and his solo stuff? I just kind of decided to split it off in 2 parts. So, what we're going to do this week is Ozzy Osbourne, the Sabbath era. So, what we're going to do is strictly discuss Black Sabbath. Basically, Black Sabbath in the 70s. And, of course, you know, they had a couple reunions throughout, like, later years. As, you know, they went through lineup changes and everything. So, let's get started here. So, it all starts in 1968. They had a couple different names that they called themselves. They had the Polka Talk Blues Band, and then in 68 through 69 they called themselves Earth, and then by 1970, just off of the name of their one song, they called themselves Black Sabbath. But imagine it's like 1968, 69, very early 1970. You imagine a world without heavy metal? No, I couldn't either. Obviously, I wasn't around in that time, so I don't know what it was like to not have heavy metal, basically. But just imagine that. Just picture this. Like, the late 60s and the early 70s was more of like your peace, love, and hippie type of rock. And, you know, a lot of it being like psychedelic type of rock, too. Which, I don't hate on that kind of rock, but I mean, this was definitely a big change from what they were used to back then. But getting on to the albums here. So, Black Sabbath as a band with Ozzy, they had 9 studio albums with Ozzy. Now, as Black Sabbath as a whole, when you figure lineup changes and everything, let's see here. I got Wiki up here. Good old Wiki. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So they had, if you don't include EPs and live albums, they had 19 studio albums. But that's spanning, like, I think like 4 different lead singers throughout the whole time. But like I said, we're only going to talk about Ozzy. So we're only going to talk about the 70s Sabbath albums. And, of course, the last Sabbath album, 13, which included Ozzy. So, okay, so starting off, obviously the self-titled album. And, yeah, like, if you're talking early 1970, very different sound. Very awesome sound, I might add. But you start off with the song Black Sabbath by the band Black Sabbath from the album Black Sabbath. So, many could arguably say this was like the first heavy metal song. Then you got The Wizard, and very famous for the harmonica in the beginning. Who thought that metal would have had a harmonica, but they pulled it off pretty well. Then you got Wasp / Behind the Walls Sleep / basically an NIB. Now, NIB, I didn't think that was like real popular till like the 2000s whenever Primus and Ozzy did it for that one tribute album. Then you got Wicked World, and then we got a bit of Finger / Sleeping Village / Warning. So it's weird. They kind of condensed this into 5 tracks here. But funny story about these albums, I have literally all the 70s Sabbath on CD. But I actually went to Walmart. Like, Walmart was kind of like phasing out like physical media. Like, there's not hardly anything on physical media anymore when you go to Walmart as far as like music goes. Like, there's more records than CDs now. But anyhow, they had a $5 bin for like years down at Moorfield Walmart, and I actually grabbed up like 6 of the 8 77th albums for like $5 a piece. Man, what a killer deal there. But yeah, definitely a good debut to all of heavy metal, I would consider this. So then we move on. We're still into 1970. And I would say arguably their most popular album, Paranoid. And this is kind of where I first remember hearing Sabbath. Obviously not in the 70s, I wasn't born yet, but my first memories of hearing Black Sabbath was from this album. So here you have War Pigs, Luke's Wall, damn good way to start the album. You got Paranoid, which I would say arguably is the most popular song they ever did, and I'm going to say like overplayed. I don't hate it though. You got Planet Caravan, you got Iron Man, which another very popular one from this. You got Electric Funeral, Hand of Doom, Rat Salad, Jack the Stripper, and Fairies Wear Boots. And yeah, this was definitely like a step up from the first album. Not that I'm hating on the first album, I love the first album, but this is good too. This is one of those that I would recommend in like if you're a casual rocker. This is definitely a good one to have in your collection if you're just a casual listener. But yeah, damn good album, very recognizable, and I would say possibly the most successful. So then, 1971 rolls around, we get Master of Reality. So here we start off with Sweet Leaf. Obviously that's like a pot song. Then you got After Forever, Embryo, Children of the Grave, I like that one, Orchard, Lord of This World, Solitude, and we end it with Into the Void. And yeah, pretty good follow-up to Paranoid. I mean, honestly, I think I like this album about the same as Paranoid. But yeah, very heavy still for the early 70s. There really wasn't like any other bands like them. I mean, maybe the closest thing to them at that time could have been Deep Purple. I mean, yeah, Deep Purple had a few albums out before Sabbath even started. But in that time, like in the late 60s, they were, like I said, psychedelic. And then Deep Purple kind of went more metal about this time. So then we move on to their fourth album, Volume 4, here in 1972. So we start off with Wheels of Confusion, Tomorrow's Dream, Changes, which I would consider that to be kind of like their first ballad. I'd consider it to be like one of the first ballads ever, honestly. You got FX, Supernaut, Snowblind, which is real good, Cornucopia, Laguna Sunrise, which is pretty good instrumental, the St. Vitus Dance, and Under the Sun. And I feel like they really got heavier with this one, honestly. But yeah, definitely a damn good album. So first half of 70s Sabbath, awesome. And I wish I was around to experience all this when it came out, honestly. But here we go. So moving on to the next one, we move on to 1973's Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. And here I feel like they got heavier on this one then. So here you got Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, real good classic. National Acrobat, Fluff, Sabracadabra, which I knew that one more because Metallica redid it on Garage Inc. back in 98. Which I did do an all-in with Metallica a while back, so go check it out. You got Killing Yourself to Live, Who Are You, Looking for Today, and Spiral Architect. And Spiral Architect really has like it's kind of a good instrumental, you know? But yeah, I love it. Great album. I'm going to have a hard time trying to rank these, or trying to figure out what's my most and least favorites here. But then, not really an album per se, but more of a greatest hits comp. You sold a soul for rock and roll. So it basically showcases everything from like Sabbath Bloody Sabbath back to the beginning, as far as like their greatest hits. And the only song on this that's not in the actual albums that I have here is Evil Woman, which I do believe. Oh wait, hold on. That's not on there. I'm wrong. No, Evil Woman was on the other compilation I have, but I think it was supposed to be on the first album, and maybe it was an outtake. So then we move on. We got 1976's Technical Ecstasy. And here we have Hole in the Sky, which, here again, I didn't know that song till I heard another band do it, which was Pantera. Did it all in with them, too. You have Don't Start Too Late, Symptom of the Universe, great song. Megalomania, Thrill of It All, Superstar. You got Am I Going Insane? And we end it with The Writ. And I feel like they really kept the heaviness into this album too when they left Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. So definitely a good solid album. So then we move on to, what year are we at here? 1976's Technical Ecstasy. So here's where I think they started to slump a bit. And I think there was like tensions within the band at that point. But here we go. So we have Backstreet Kids, You Won't Change Me, It's Alright, Gypsy, All Moving Parts Stand Still, Rock and Roll Doctor, which is pretty good, She's Gone, and Dirty Woman. And I think Rock and Roll Doctor and Dirty Woman are like the best two tracks off of this one. Again, another $5 score at Walmart. So not too bad. So then we move on to 1978, Never Say Die. Yeah, I mean, they were pretty busy throughout this decade. So, of course, you start off with the title track, Never Say Die. You got Johnny Blade, Junior's Eyes, A Hard Road, Shockwave, Air Dance, Over to You, Breakout, and Swingin' the Chain. And I kind of feel like from like the last album to here, they sort of just kind of went more mediocre, I guess. I mean, not bad albums, but if I'm picking anything from Sabbath, I would say like from like Volume 4 to Sabotage. They're like, the three best ones in my opinion. But as far as like the whole 70s discography, love it. And oh yeah, so here's the compilation I was talking about. It's like a 2-disc greatest hits that covers basically all those albums right here. And this didn't drop until like 2002. But there's really nothing special about this as far as like the tracks. They just took the best of and just put them on there. Yeah, this is where they have the song Evil Woman. So really, that's the only track. The only track that's not on these is Evil Woman. But I actually got this before I scored everything else for like $5 a piece. So that's what was getting me by for years until I found like the $5 bin at Walmart. But Black Sabbath, so the year's 1980. Lots of changes happen on the turn of the decade. So at this point, Ozzy Osbourne leaves the band and ends up starting up his solo career. Meanwhile, Black Sabbath brings in Ronnie James Dio for the next album there, but we're going to discuss all that another time. Those are all going to be like other videos, I do believe. So, spoiler alerts. So, we'll sort of skip over that timeline for now when it comes to Sabbath, and we'll move on to 1998. So, this is their live album reunion. Now, yeah, I know, I said I'm not going to talk about live albums, but there's a reason I'm going to talk about this. So, you got all four members. You got Tony Iommi, Bill Ward, Geezer Butler, and Ozzy Osbourne. They reunite for the first time in probably 20 years or so. Close to 20 years anyway. So then, they reunite, they do a reunion tour, and I believe this show here was recorded in Birmingham, which is where Sabbath basically started. And this is really, this album, honestly, I'm talking about it more for nostalgic reasons than anything. This album right here got me more and more into Sabbath than I ever was, honestly. Kind of introduced me to like all the tracks that they've done. Of course, I'm hearing them live, but they also have 2 studio tracks on this that are exclusive to this album. So I remember like the song Psycho Man getting a lot of airplay, and then the second single, Selling My Soul, it wasn't as popular, but it's still a pretty good tune. So, but yeah, I would say this kind of got my foot in the door as far as liking Black Sabbath. So, if you're into good live albums, this is definitely a good one here. Of course, I'm not going to talk about all the songs because I've already talked about them on the studio albums. But yeah, definitely a classic for sure. I think I might have been like a senior in high school when I bought this, so it's kind of amazing how Black Sabbath, even when they reunited, they really stayed relevant to like the current scene back then. So then they part ways again. You know, Black Sabbath continues on with other lineups. And of course, Ozzy, he continues on with his solo career. And then, years and years later, they get back together in around 2013. And they come out with the album 13. How appropriate. But it's not all 4 original members this time. It's 3 of the 4. So here we have End of the Beginning, God Is Dead, which, God Is Dead, that's like the biggest single off of this one. Really good track. And I almost feel like the later Sabbath tracks with Ozzy, like even including the 2 that were on Reunion, you really get more of an Ozzy solo sound with it. Like his voice really changed a lot in that time. Okay, so we have Loner, Zeitgeist, I think that's a German word. You got Age of Reason, Live Forever, Damaged Soul, and Dear Father. And this is mind blown on this one. So if you listen to the last track on this, Dear Father, like they actually do an outro to this, which basically is the same as the intro to the song Black Sabbath. So it's almost like they're saying, hey, we came full circle. Almost like, you know, you're looping around, starting over again. So, yeah, my mind was blown when I heard that. So then they also have 3 bonus tracks called Mathematic, Peace of Mind, and Paria. So then they tour for like about 2 to 3 more years. So they're doing the End Tour. And they ended up releasing an EP, which was it was a very, very limited release. You can't download it. The only way you can really get it is if you go on eBay and pay out the ass for it, or go on YouTube and listen to it, which is what I did. So here in this EP, it contains 4 new studio tracks, and then 4 live tracks at the end. We'll just talk about the studio tracks. So this one starts off with Season of the Dead, Cry All Night, Take Me Home, and Isolated Man. So, like, if you search the album The End, you want to search The End EP, because the last live album they did was also called The End. And they recorded their last live show that they've ever done. But, and I'll probably get into this next video, but it is worth noting that Black Sabbath and all 4 original members will be getting back together for a one-time show in July down in Birmingham. It's like, it's going to be like Ozzy doing a solo set, and then the original members of Black Sabbath doing a set, and then that's it, they're done. Ozzy's done, Black Sabbath is done, but yeah, I mean, as far as 13 goes, I enjoyed that album, I liked it. You know, very different from the 70s Sabbath, but I just love how they ended the whole discography the same way they started it. It's just, it's mind-blowing. So, how do I want to rate these? I guess I'm going to kind of do the same thing as I did with Led Zeppelin, because all the 70s Sabbath was already there before I could remember, so it's all in one for me. So I'll give my favorites and least favorites on the 70s Sabbath, and of course 13, it's on its own because it was in the 2010s. Reunion I'm not even going to count because it was a live album. But the couple of new tracks on that were good. So let's see here. Oh boy. I know that my least favorite would be Never Say Die. Or is it Technical Ecstasy? I would say it's almost a tie between them, the last two there. I didn't care for them as much as, like all the previous albums they did. Now, as far as my favorite from them, from that era, boy oh boy. And not that I hate any of them. I don't know. It's going to be a close one between Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, and Sabotage. Even Volume 4, I mean, it's real close too. So, oh boy, I don't know. I'm going to say Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath is my favorite on that. But yeah, 70 Sabbath, love it. Definitely different for its time. And then, of course, 13, if you want something different to listen to with Ozzy, definitely check it out. That's the only one that I actually had to download. I never bought that one on physical. But as far as Black Sabbath goes, I never did get to see Black Sabbath live. Now, me and my buddies almost did. We got tickets to see Black Sabbath in Hershey one time, just for the sole purpose of seeing Disturbed, because Disturbed was opening up for them, but I forget what happened, but for some reason or another, the show ended up getting canceled, and we got refunded for the tickets. Why it got canceled, I can't remember, but I remember being disappointed that we weren't going to see Disturbed, and I wasn't going to see Black Sabbath, but luckily Disturbed came back on their own, and we went and saw them again anyway, so... But no, never got to see the actual Black Sabbath, or any iteration of Black Sabbath. But I think you guys know where the next vid is going. Or, actually, before we move on to the next one, hold on a minute. We're not scripted. I'm going to keep this rolling. I meant to get these down whenever, before I started rolling film here. Rolling tape. Ah, here they are. Here we go. Okay, I'm back. I want to give honorable mention to these albums, the Nativity and Black albums, volumes 1 and 2. So, this is volume 1. This dropped in 94. And basically all it is Black Sabbath covers. So, like, the more modern heavy metal bands are going through and covering Black Sabbath. So we have After Forever by Biohazard. We have Children of the Grave by White Zombie. Paranoid by Megadeth. That's a good cover. 1000 Homo DJs with Supernaut. You got Ozzy Osbourne teaming up with Therapy for Iron Man. That's kind of like sort of like a half rock, half rap track. You got Corrosion of Conformity with Lord of This World. You got Sepultura with Symptom of the Universe. Love that cover. Boring Brummies with The Wizard. Bruce Dickinson with Godspeed with Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. Here's a name you haven't heard in forever. Ugly Kid Joe. They redid NIB. Then you have Faith No More with a live version of War Pigs. And this set ends with Typo Negative doing their version of Black Sabbath. And then this one is kind of more in the grunge area, I guess. And then here we move on to the second one. This coming out in 2000. So at this point here, we're right in the midst of the new metal era. So here we start off with Godsmack's version of Sweet Leaf. We got Machine Head's version of Hole in the Sky. Honestly, I think Pantera did a better version of that. You got Static X with Behind a Wall of Sleep. Megadeth with Never Say Die. System of a Down with Snowblind. Pantera with Electric Funeral. Damn good. This is probably the most popular one out of the all compilations, and I mentioned it earlier. You got Primus with Ozzy with NIB, and that version of NIB was all over the airwaves back in around 2000. Still a damn good track today. So then we have Slayer with Hand of Doom, Soulfly with Under the Sun, Head PE with Sabracadabra. You got Monster Magnet with Into the Void, and this is kind of weird. We have Busta Rhymes doing Iron Man. So, kind of weird. End it with a rap track. But yeah, great tributes to a legend right there, to a legendary band. But yeah, I almost forgot. I had to give an honorable mention to those albums. Because let's think about it. If it wasn't for Black Sabbath, all the bands on these compilations would never have had any success or even been created. So they're just kind of like paying tribute to what started it all. And that's awesome. But, okay, now we're going to move on to next time. And I think we all know where this is going, so we'll see you next time.